This version of Victoria 3 definitely looks a little bit different, a little bit being probably the understatement of the video. This is Divergences, a version of Victoria Mod that presents a world with many points of divergence, divergent events that have differed from our current timeline. Think of it what you will, an alternative universe, an alternate history. This is a total conversion mod for Victoria 3, and if you haven't already gathered, it's all about changing the map, but not just that, but also the nations, the events and decisions and journal entries that are behind them as well. But obviously, it is most striking in how it changes Victoria 3's world. You can see from the get-go here that our number one great power, the big bad boy, is now the dual monarchy, because of course in this mod everything's happened a little bit different, and England and France have largely combined into one after victory of the English, though they do share a border with Burgundy, and of course Aragon, which stretches across the Mediterranean and comes right into conflict with Spain. The Egyptians and the Ottomans remain relatively unchanged, but if you bounce back into Europe, that is where this mod pack really diverges. As you can see, Poland, a major power, bumping up against Hungary, which starts at war. Bohemia as well, a nice central power in the mess that is Germany, or modern day Germany. These Germanic states and republics are, dare I say, even more messy than what they are in the normal version of Victoria 3. I don't know. Scandinavia is a big old united bad boy, becoming one of the major players in the game. A very fun campaign awaits you up into the north, but not as fun as Lord Novgorod the Great is having, as the 20th ranked minor power, and a whole load of little principalities and what have you underneath, and maybe Siberia to colonize as well, if the Ainu don't get there first with their 0 battalions. I'm not quite sure they're going to. But in case you haven't got the feeling so far, everything is a little bit different. And as I pan across the rest of Asia here, let me give you some more context. From the mod makers themselves, and shout out to them, they ask us the question, what if? Ever since the end of the Great German War, apologies, the ideals of freedom and nationhood cherished by the German rebels seem buried, i.e. they're gone. In England, Holland, and Brandenburg, the authority of foreign kings is uncontested. No one's going to fight that. But the calm over Europe since the end of the war is an illusion. Throughout the continent, the beginnings of industrialisation goes to figure, it's a Victorian era game after all, and the time period hasn't changed. The spread of new knowledge, the rise of nationalism, and growing discontent among population hints at changes to come. Just like how Australia and New Zealand have changed, by the way. Aotearoa, a fairly large playable nation from the start, at least what it normally is, but you'll notice colonial powers have little grips everywhere. Tasmania here owned by Scandinavia, while the Australian states differ a little bit, and of course Burgundy have a hold as well. You'll see familiar colonial powers fighting for uncontested territories across the ditch here in the Americas as well. Back to the description of the mod though, they go on to say that in Arcadia and Ameriga, young powers are emerging to challenge those in the old world, and in supposedly sleeping Asia, where those old nations are reinventing themselves. And of course, as I scroll through and look at a few different powers, you can see that there are quite a few fairly evenly sized nations, not just in terms of the space that they take up on the map, but also in terms of their literacy or their population, their GDP. A lot of them ranking in and around, say, the 5 to 10 million mark in terms of both population and GDP. But of course, there are plenty of other smaller players to really dive into and play with as well. I thought, seeing as Hungary starts fighting, it might be a good idea to jump in and check out a little bit of Hungary. Finally, it's important to note that the three main features that the mod delivers are the immersive alternate history, of course, delivered by a reworked map with all new states, which we've just looked at, and then finally new decisions and journal entries. And of course, these combine with some of the existing ones that are already inside of Victoria 3 to create a fairly fun and nuanced version of the game. Obviously, agree, the map is the big selling point, but the map doesn't just stand alone. The map is, of course, literally the game. Hello, you're watching a video about a map and I'm talking about it. We probably like maps. The mod does a good job at changing it, but of course it changes what underpins it as well. And so as I jump in here with Hungary, going through the familiar process of recruiting generals and getting the nation ready for war, I remind myself that I'm going to war with the nation that wouldn't normally exist. But good luck to Big Look and their fight against Hungary at the very beginning of the game, which of course, as another gentle reminder, begins at 1836, just like a normal playthrough of Victoria 3 would do. For this mod pack doesn't change the starting year, it just changes everything else around us. And as I decide between having a feudal-based army and peasant levies, the note here you'll notice being just a change to some of the multipliers at the bottom, although the political strength and overarching feel to having your army full of peasants remains. I begin to kick the absolute loving backsides of my foe. Some 2-1 on the stats that matter anyway, coming in my favor, and it's reminding me, of course, that we have these new journal entries, and I'm in fact fighting in one right now, because of course every single new nation on the map, of which we've seen countless, I don't think anybody could have even keep track, has its own story, its own immersive, alternate history story to go alongside of it. And I think that as we enforce our war goals here and determine that Hungary is a significant power, at least the size of Bohemia to the side, it's important that we look at a couple of other interesting players that this mod pack could deliver to you. Futa Jalon picked up my interest, first of all, not just because I would butcher its name, but because I thought that looking at a new player in Africa could be an interesting place to start. As I mentioned earlier in the video, the colonial powers are a little bit different in this game too, so the race to Africa is completely different from their perspective, but also from ours. I couldn't help but notice this little bit of Gambia stabbing inside of me though, and that left me feeling a little bit frustrated, and that, aside with no journal entries, had me looking towards Spain instead, although that other one would probably deliver a pretty interesting playthrough, actually, into Morocco. Here I've switched countries, the year 1839, and starting as Spain, we're thrown into conflict, which is not ideal, proving that Spain did prove, in fact, to be a little bit of a pain, although it did reflect quite well some journal entries and, of course, nation forming. As we looked to get Iberia and I swallowed Morocco whole, Spain's starting point actually seems like one that could be pretty easy to leverage in this game and compete with some of the other new major powers if you don't want to play the likes of the dual monarchy yourself. Starting completely afresh, though, in 1836, a fresh save file, I thought, all right, I'll have a look and see what this mod has to offer, and I'll play a game or some gameplay over in the Americas. Gran Colombia, why not, right? It takes the place of Mexico, and of course it's pushing up onto where the United States would be, and I find myself inadvertently instantly at war, but this time not even for my own means. No, it's actually some other new players, and again, highlighting what this mod pack has to offer. Here I'm fighting an initial journal entry for the Andino War of Independence. The people of New Toledo, the country in bright blue, are fighting against the Viceroy of New Granada, who, by the way, happens to be Spain, who we were just looking at earlier. Again, proving the interrelations of this game. But anyway, I go to past colonial exploitation because, of course, I have my own goals on the sideline, and then quickly move through to doing something that I didn't think I would be doing right at the start again, just like we did earlier with Hungry Hippos. Yet here we are, building up our military once more, and also sort of quickly trying to plug the gaps in an economy like you might do at the start of, to be fair, not just the modded Victoria 3 playthrough, but almost any. I take a look down at the war, and indeed the people of New Toledo and I, we've kind of got it cut out for us. We're coming up against the might of Spain. Thankfully, no one else seems to really like them either. And it's at this point that the war goals become clear to me. We're pushing for a regime change, but they are pushing to puppet New Toledo. It is indeed for the freedom of them that we are fighting. I also pass some new colonial laws and move up to stomp out some freedom. Up in the north, further pushing Gran Colombia up into the middle of the Americas and hopefully finding us a way to jostle in between these new and emerging Asian powers that have come to take over this land, or indeed reformed nations on this land, completely, of course, alternate to how Victoria 3 would paint the map at the beginning of the game, where it's basically just Canada, the United States, and some colonial territories. And the fighting here is rough, don't get me wrong, but if these anecdotes have hopefully proven anything to you, it's that this mod pack and this alternate history start for Victoria 3 is anything but. It truly does deliver on its three key features of an alternate history, a reworked map with new states and decisions and journal entries to boot, and I look forward to seeing how it adds more formables, journal entries, and decisions in future updates. Thank you so much for joining me today in this mod spotlight, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, everybody.